everyone, I am Ashtyn and I am interviewing my great grandma. Today is September 21st, 2020. So Lulee, how did you feel when Papa left?
Well, naturally, in the report for your teacher, all of this is already printed, but I will say he lived of long distance from where I lived. So when he actually left for the war, he was in New Jersey. And I was a high school kid in the state of Connecticut. So I wasn't really aware the day that he boarded the ship and disappeared for the war.
Okay. What did you do when you got to see him after the war?
Well, after the war, once again, he was way in New Jersey and I was in Connecticut. But as soon as he could come, he was on a train traveling to Connecticut to get back to his special girlfriend who was already planning for the wedding that was going to take place. So he came and was there to talk things over with me and to assure me that he loved me very much. And we were so glad that the war was over. But in the report for the teacher from you, there will be some very shocking incidents that took place and things that you will never forget after you read this report that Grandma is going to retype for me so that it looks real super duper for you.
Okay.
So I'm sure we kissed. It's time we kissed after he was gone so long.
Okay. Did you write letters to communicate?
Oh yes, that's another important fact that's in this report for your teacher. The government made arrangements if the sailor wrote a letter this big, even bigger, they were able to shrink it down until about this size, and they were called V mails. Whether the V was for victory or whatever, it doesn't matter. They were called V mails. And there will be a picture of one of the V mails with no message on it, but just so that the children and teacher can see what a V mail looks like. And Grandma has a picture in the book that I already put back on the shelf, but the picture of the V-mail, and a couple of the V-mails have very personal messages, and they are from the boy that really loved me. You can tell because he's calling me darling and sweetheart, but it's not the boy I married. But the incident that's important is the young man that wrote these V mails was killed in the war. He was a machine gunner. And here are a few pictures of the one that was killed and me, here. And it looks like we love each other, but I already had my boy chosen that who I would marry. Oh, excuse me. Yes, those V mails should be pictured. And Cliff would say, "Don't forget me." And then one time he wrote, I am in the best health possible. So by that, I thought he has been injured. The machine gunners wanted to get killed because a machine gun can kill so many people at the same time. So what did they want to do? They wanted to kill Cliff. But he was born again, and I knew that he was in heaven. But it was very, very upsetting and sad.
So, did you communicate any other way, or just by
Oh, well, it was mostly by mail. But as I mentioned previously, one good thing is when the mail came to my house, those days, would you believe that mail was delivered twice a day? And so that gave me hopes that if I didn't get a letter from him in the first delivery mail, I could wait for the afternoon mail and maybe get my mail. So it was mainly by mail. But one time when he came to, what do they call it, when the ship stops at an island? They
Port?
stopped for a respite maybe, or change. And when he went ashore on his feet, he called me on the telephone. It was a wonderful opportunity, but I didn't include this in this report. But when he called me, guess what he wanted me to do? He wanted me to come out to the state of Washington, which would be about 3,000 miles, to get married out there. But then when I told my mother and father about it, guess what? They said, absolutely not. You are not going out there by yourself and marry that young man. And if he really loves you, he will wait till discharge of the Navy and come home and have a church wedding. Therefore, that's exactly what happened. But they wouldn't let me go, and I cried. But it's just that I cried that he wanted me to come, and they said no. And something else they said no to. Wait till you hear this. My special boyfriend, his name was Joe Chapman. Sound familiar? My boyfriend bought me a coat. It was called a Chesterfield. So it was a red Chesterfield coat, beautiful, with a black collar. And once again, my folks said, Lucy, you cannot keep that coat. It is not right for a boyfriend to buy clothes for my child. We supply her clothing. So guess who cried and cried and cried and got sick? Because I cried so much I wanted to keep that coat, because I loved him too. But why couldn't they understand that? Because they were a good, set of parents, that's why. Let me see what picture she gave me.
But you did get
Oh, yes. There's Joe Chapman playing the organ in the Navy, many years ago. Anyway, excuse me, I must finish about my coat. But I cried so hard, they finally gave in. And let me keep the coat. But crying does not always get the way a child wants. But I think they understood, with the horrible war going on and people getting killed, and Cliff had already been killed, And when they brought his body home, his same clothing was on his body. Now, this is the one that didn't make it. And in one of the little pockets were the words of a hymn that I had sent to Cliff. His name was Cliff Olson. And he lived right near me in Connecticut. So I had a boyfriend that would take me to the drugstore for Cokes and so forth. So I had one at home, and I had more important one away. But anyway, in the little pocket on the dead boy's body were these words. Wherever, anywhere with Jesus, I can safely go. Anywhere, I can't remember all the words, but there they were, even though they had been damaged because in his death process, naturally anything that was in his pockets. But I'm glad it was left in his pocket so I could have proof that Cliff read those precious words before he died. And I'm sure he loved them. I'm finished with that one now. I know you want me to continue because the stories are so precious.
How did you meet?
I got to hear it again.
How did you meet?
Oh, that's an interesting one. One of my sisters and a girlfriend and I in the Connecticut church won a Sunday school contest. And the prizes that we got were fully expenses paid for a week at the tri-state, at the campgrounds, except it was a hotel, and it was called Harvey Cedars. And so the preacher drove the three of us to the Bible conference grounds, and this building, a big hotel, was right smack on the ocean. So when we went swimming, it was right there on the ocean. And the three of us really enjoyed that week at Harvey Cedars Bible Conference. And my boyfriend worked there. He helped serve the meals, and the manager of the Bible conference said he really wasn't too good at life-saving, but he was called the lifesaver in case there was any trouble at the beach with those waves knocking people down and so forth. So that was how I met Joe Chapman. And when our week was over, once again, I'm crying my head off because I did not want to say goodbye to him. And the manager of the Bible conference called him HB. I said, why you call him HB? What does that stand for? And it stood for Heartbreaker, because he was the one that I was crying about. So that's how we originally met. And from then on, my parents, as strict as they were, did let him come to visit once a month. No more than that, just once a month. So sometimes when he came on the train, he accidentally missed getting on it to go home. Therefore, I had to take him back to my house again because he was a stinker. He didn't want to leave me, but he had to. But he eventually got back home. And his parents loved him very much too.
Well, that is it.
Good. I hope it helped.
Thank
Good.
you. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Here I am on the honeymoon at Harvey Cedars.
I thought you were gonna show those pictures.
And here's how Joe Chapman looked before he went in the Navy and when we loved each other. And here he is in his uniform.
On that one, it says, let me see this one.
It says January.
January 10th.
That's
of
a bad picture, but look, he was called a signalman on board ship. And if you look carefully, he's way up on top of something, signaling other ships. And that is a precious, precious picture.
He had flags in his hand. And he
Yes,
would,
you can
he would
see
do
that.
things with flags and communicate with the other ship that way. So, because they didn't have fancy dancy radios or anything.
And listen, one more little fact concerning that. One day, another ship came nearby, and lo and behold, it was the ship where Joe Chapman had a brother on the other ship, and he was able to signal about his name and so forth, and they were able to get together for a very short time.
They stopped.
But that was good.
This here says January the 10th, 1943. Is that just before he went into the...
Yeah.
So he was 17 in that picture.
Does anyone have the best eyesight and can try and read the blue stuff?
So in your report will at least be a picture of one of those V males. You know that war was so terrible.
That's a question she can ask me.
Right now, this is what I wanted you to understand. This is just another paragraph. Right now, dear great-granddaughter Ashtyn, I shall jump to the wonderful, thrilling ending of the war that took place in September 2nd, 1945. A year after I graduated from high school, a shocking figure that goes on in history is that the war took 60 to 80 million people in deaths. That is horrible, which was 3% of the entire world's population killed. Now, I said, now to answer some of your questions. And then here I am answering your questions. You'll have to. And I hope the teacher appreciates it. And if she says it was too long or something like that, then we'll cry together. Because it wasn't easy to reminisce carefully.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Ash,
Yeah.
is it still running?
What?
Is it still running?
No.
I was gonna say,
Those aren't for her to take, are they?
No,
They can't
You
just.
could ask her, if Papa was ever in danger during the war, the 3 years he was out at sea, if he was ever in any direct danger. That's a very good question. Yeah, but this is to
Ash,
get
this
it
is
on.
for the video.
As soon as you
It's
get the
still running?
report, of course, you can read it before your teacher gets it.
Okay, I have one more question.
Oh,
Is it running?
Yeah.
One more question from Grandma.
Was Papa in any direct danger
During the war.
during the war?
It's in the report, but I'll reminisce to you right now. Listen carefully. He was on board ship way out in the Atlantic Ocean, and the enemy was very close by. In fact, you might not understand how serious this is or was, but the enemy had what they called suicide dive bombers. In other words, soldiers from that country of Japan that were willing to die for the sake of their country. But all those deaths of the Japanese didn't win the war. We did. But anyway, that person hit directly on the ship where Papa and all these other sailors were, which caused a lot of serious damage. And most of all, naturally, when you are a suicide dive bomber, do you expect to live? Absolutely not. And so there they have an enemy body on board their precious ship, dead. Do they just chop him up and throw pieces in the ocean to get even with that person? No. They gave him a respectable, I don't know the words that were used, but they had this like a slide, and they wrapped him, put him on the top of the slide to go down and be buried at sea. Which, if they had their own dead on board ship, because of medical reasons, they also had to take care of their bodies and then send word home that they were sacrificed because they died patriotically for the sake of our precious country. So I hope when all this is understood by you and the others at school, they'll realize what a great country we have. Even though we have lots of problems and even lots of hatred by some people, it is still the best country in the world that I have ever heard anything about. And of course, having been born and lived here only, naturally I am faithfully honoring my own country. And it deserves to be honored that way too. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Thanks a lot, Lulee.
Thank
I was
you.
glad to help because it caused me to reminisce too. And I also said how many years that sailor, it's in your report, how many years we had as a married couple. Yeah. And I also mentioned Cliff in the first part of it, that how shocking it was for this wonderful Christian family to get a telegram from the government that their son had been killed. Oh man, our church was all so upset and sad, but had to be expected. And to start off with the report, I said as a young teenager, I was fully aware how bad the war was, but didn't quite understand, except I was glad that it was not in our country. But I remembered standing out on the sidewalk right outside the house where we lived there in Connecticut, and convoy. Do you know what a convoy is? Okay. A truck full of people, service people. Another truck full of service people. Truck after truck after truck. heading for the war. So some of us kids would go out and we would wave to every one of them, sometimes throw kisses to try to encourage them. So I guess I mentioned that in the report.
Ash,
Yeah.
ask her if she
Okay.
remembers.
I don't know what she said,
If she
Jonathan.
remembers and what she felt like when the announcement was made that the war was over. If she remembers hearing
Can
that
it repeat
announcement.
it to me? I
She's
could not
asking
hear.
how you felt when you heard the war was over.
Oh, you can't imagine the cheering, the excitement that the war was over, and they would be coming home. The servicemen would be coming home, and it was just so beautiful. It's hard to explain. I don't even know at what spot I have that. Well, one place, speaking of Cliff, I said his death was an eye-opener, and what further for us to expect in this horrible war across the ocean, and to anticipate the ending and so forth. But I'm not gonna share anymore. It'll be good for you to read it after it gets printed nicely. Good.
Great.
Good. Did it record nicely or?